Hi, my name is Gary, and on October 2nd of this year, 2012, I had a hemorrhagic stroke to an area of my brainstem called the pons, the PONS. Some people whose opinions I respect thought that I should talk about it and tell people exactly what happened to give them a sort of blow by blow experience and to let people know what having a stroke is like and what recovering from a stroke is like. So that's what I'm going to do. And if you find it interesting, great. If you don't, you can just change the channel. It happened, like I said, October 2nd, around 9:30 p.m. Um, my wife and I are late diners. We had just sat down to dinner, a dinner that I helped make. Um, we were watching Jeopardy, and I was um, answering the questions like always, or trying to, and all of a sudden I noticed that my finger had made contact with a piece of chicken that was on the plate. And I thought to myself, I should probably remove that. That's rather warm. And my finger stayed on the piece of chicken, and I kept saying, I really think I should move my finger, and it never quite was able to do so. So, what happened was I kind of slumped back from the table and had a look about me that something was really wrong. And so my wife asked me what was the matter, and I was kind of unable to tell her. I kind of said, I don't know exactly. So she jumped up and dialed 911. That was the last thing I wanted to do. I said, don't make the call, don't make the call. But finally, I came to the understanding that something was so wrong with me that, yeah, it was time to make a call, time to dial 911. So she dialed 911. She had a couple of connectivity issues, but nonetheless, they sent an ambulance. Actually, they sent the whole cavalry. They sent fire trucks, they sent rescue trucks, they sent an ambulance, and they basically brought in a chair and put me in the chair and carried me off into the ambulance. I remember being interested. The chair had a locking mechanism. It just struck me that way. As we started on our way to the hospital, lights and sirens blazing. By the way, this was like the real deal. Um, I I I made mention that I might be throwing up, and apparently, when you have a stroke the way I had a stroke, um, throwing up is not uncommon. So they put a bucket under me, what they call apparently in the medical industry an emesis basin, under my mouth, and I proceeded to throw up rather spectacularly. But other than that, it was an uneventful trip to the hospital. They got me in the hospital, and everybody just hovered right over me. It was 100 different. Can you feel this? Can you do this? Where does it hurt anywhere? What can you do? What can't you do? Etc. They yelled at me a lot. They just looked right in my face and said, "Are you okay, Gary? Can you hear me, Gary?" And I indicated that yes, I could hear them. For some reason, I never lost any sort of ability to communicate. I could speak. I had control over my speech. I didn't have any aphasia, substituting one word for another, or ataxia, which is a general problem speaking. My speech was a little bit difficult to understand, understandable given the circumstances, but I always had it. I was always able to maintain that element of things, and so I told them that I couldn't move my left side, and which was a bitch because I'm left-handed, or at least I was. Um, so that I couldn't move my left side, and I had feeling in my left. I maintained the ability to sort of feel when they were touching me on the left side. They So they did their stuff to me. They gave me a CAT scan to make sure that to find where the issue was, and they determined that it was a hemorrhagic stroke as opposed to an ischemic stroke. When an ischemic stroke happens, you have a blood clot, and part of your brain is starved of blood and so dies. When you have a hemorrhagic stroke, it's something in your brain, a blood vessel pops or starts to bleed in some way, and it puts pressure on part of your brain and injures it. Doesn't kill it, injures it. And so that was fortunate. I had the hemorrhagic stroke instead of an ischemic stroke. And they determined where it was. It was in my brainstem. An area that controls my ability to swallow. So until I learned that back, I had to be fed through other means. So in the immediate short term, they gave me an NG tube. In other words, they stuck a tube up my nose and snaked it down into my trachea, or not my trachea, my esophagus, which was incredibly uncomfortable, but it was the only way I could take any kind of nourishment. But they subjected me to a number of cognitive tests. They gave me a sheet of paper with a little scenario drawn on it with children and a mother, and asked me to interpret it. And I was able to tell them, yes, it's two children fighting over a cookie jar, one of whom is falling off a stool, and the mother is ignoring it while the sink overflows. And they asked me to, they gave me a sheet of words, word pairs, and asked me to say them, and I was able to do so. And my recollection is I was able to speak okay. The people who were there tell a different tale. They said that that it was difficult for me to actually to be understood at first. People had to say, "What? What did you say?" And I had to stop and repeat myself quite slowly. I was looked at a lot. I was poked a lot. I was prodded a lot. And then I was after I was subject to my first CAT scan. To determine where and what happened, I was. They waited until a bed was available in the neural ICU, and after some difficulties, they finally got me there. When you're in an ICU, they don't care about sleep. They wake you up every hour to test your blood, to look in your eyes with a flashlight to determine if with my eyes I can follow a finger. They don't care if I'm sleeping. They just wake you up. They're interested in getting you healthy. They're not interested at all in actually, letting you rest. So it was not a particularly restful time for me. I had that goddamn NG tube in my nose, which was uncomfortable to begin with, and making it difficult for me to swallow when I did swallow. By the way, the difficulty swallowing was not the actual act of swallowing, but apparently there's a flap that covers your windpipe when you swallow and allows the food to go down the right tube. And that was what was faulty. And they were worried that if I took food, through the normal way, that it would go down the wrong tube and I would aspirate it and I would get pneumonia from it, and that's a bad thing. So anyways, there I was in the neural ICU, uncomfortable, poked and prodded, and the next episode of this, we're going to talk about what happened next, including my mother coming and looking at me and collapsing into tears. So I hope you find this interesting, or found it interesting, and if you like it, comment, and maybe I'll do a second episode quickly. Thanks everybody for listening. See you later.